So I had not planned to do another video on the Marilyn Manson situation so soon after my last one, but I got so many comments and a number of requests for a follow-up. And since there were some major developments this week, especially one of his main accusers, Esme Bianco, came out and officially named him as her abuser and did some major interviews. And so I just feel like it's a really timely thing, and I do have more to say, and I also have some comments on some of your questions and issues that some of you raised over my last video. And so anyway, I'm going to get right into it, but just know, those of you who prefer my Amber Heard Johnny Depp videos, just know that one of those is coming up this week. But I want to start actually with Esme Bianco's interview with Good Morning America and just go through it and talk about my impressions. And so let's just get to it, and I'm going to talk about it as we go through.
Now with an ABC News exclusive. Game of Thrones actress Esme Bianco says she was physically, emotionally, and sexually abused by rock star Marilyn Manson. And she sat down with Kaylee Hartine to discuss the allegations. And Kaylee, viewers should know the details are graphic.
Yes, they should, George. And just as Esme Bianco was becoming a star on Game of Thrones, she now says that Marilyn Manson was turning her life into a nightmare. Several women have come forward in the past couple of weeks with similar allegations of abuse against the shock rocker. But Esme Bianco is the first woman to come forward and describe the horror she says she experienced on camera.
I have to say right off the bat, before we even get into the interview, there's just something really nauseating about so much modern media coverage and the way that issues are presented and contextualized. And I mean, I could, if I had time, I would go on a little detour and talk about how ridiculous I think that this intro in and of itself was, regardless of whether or not her allegations against Manson are true or not. I mean, just what a kind of ridiculous opening that says a lot about the moment that we're at in our culture and in our media and so forth. All right, let's watch the interview.
Were you abused by Marilyn Manson?
Yes, it was.
How long did it take you to realize that's what was happening?
7 years after I left.
Bianco's best known for her role in the hit series Game of Thrones.
It's not easy for girls like us to dig our way out.
Now, again, I just have to say, you know, it's so cliche and it's just so stupid and so just irritating that, you know, of course they're going to pull a scene from Game of Thrones where she's talking about how women have it so hard in life and they're so abused and all of that. And I'm just saying, like, the whole effort being made here, and I'm talking about Good Morning America, I'm talking about the media, I'm not even talking about Esme right now, but the whole effort being made to sort of package this up into this like sort of like cheap, ridiculous entertainment. I don't know.
But her career began as a model and burlesque performer in London.
So burlesque dancing, it is a form of erotic dance. And so as probably a number of you know, Manson's ex-wife, Dita Von Teese, is really like probably the most famous, currently the most famous burlesque dancer in the world. Well, what's the point? What am I getting at? Well, it's just important to understand, and it will be later, to understand that Esme, the profession that Esme Bianco was in before she even met Marilyn Manson as a burlesque dancer, it was a profession that was highly eroticized. Now, some of you are already probably getting upset and saying, oh my God, is she about to start slut shaming and saying, well, she deserved it because she did erotic dancing? No, that's not at all where I'm going with this, but tuck it away in your head because I will bring it up later, okay? Continue.
In 2005, she was introduced to Marilyn Manson, the controversial global rock star who she idolized as a teenager.
How did you first come into Marilyn Manson's orbit?
So I was introduced to him by his then fiancée, Dita Von Teese. When I spoke with him for the first time, the first words out of his mouth were, "I've been a fan of yours for years."
Over the next 4 years, she says they built a friendship based on their mutual interest in art and music. He gained her trust. Then in 2009, she says Manson asked her to star in a music video he was making and flew her from London to LA.
He told me that we were going to shoot it all on flip cam so that we could do it ourselves. That was like the beginning of the nightmare.
This is when she says Manson was first violent with her.
It got to the stage where he wanted to shoot the finale of the video, and he locked me in his bedroom and he tied me to a wooden prayer kneeler. I was half naked, and he beat me with a whip. and he filmed it.
But I do want to point out the things that bother me and that incline me to think that we do need to maintain a presumption of innocence, like I said, for Marilyn Manson, unless and until we have evidence. So what bothers me about this? Well, right off the bat, she says that he flew her out to LA with the idea that they were going to shoot this movie, this music video, sort of guerrilla style, as in just using a flip phone. And she's there for several days, and and then on the final day, it sounds like the final scene, the sort of climactic scene of this. He has her get down on a kneeler, which is like, if you know anything about like history of Christianity, and people would go like to churches, and specifically in Catholicism, it's something they would like kneel down on this structure to pray. You've probably seen, some of you have seen it before. Anyway, the point is, he has her kneel on this thing, and she says, then he starts whipping her in a really violent way. It really hurts, and she says it brought up these whelps, these scars on her back. Now, she depicts it, and the media has depicted it as like this guy is just really sadistic, and he's just basically using these excuses to get luring people in, luring women in with these false promises that he's doing one thing, like making a video, but really what he's doing is just using it as an excuse to be sadistic. She doesn't give us any more information on this. But to me, it seems a little strange that if his intention was to get this woman there to do all of these, to act out all of these sadistic fantasies that he had, why does he wait until the very last day? And it sounds like the last part of the last day of filming. And basically, it sounds like restricts himself to this one scene of violence. Is it not conceivable that he legitimately was filming some kind of music video or a prototype for one, or a work of art, and that the natural progression of a work of art is that it gets really violent, or not violent, but it gets climactic at the end, right? I mean, we know this. We understand like the nature of a story and everything. So he waits until the last day. I guess what I'm saying is there's two ways to look at this. Yes, one is that he lured this woman here, so and pretended like they were filming this video so that he could act out this violence on her. But another way of looking at it, which to me seems equally as plausible, is that he really was doing everything that he intended, or he intended everything that he said he did, and that he was shooting this video, his work of art or whatever. And it got to this climactic scene, and apparently he had warned her ahead of time. He had said, you're going to have to expect to be manhandled with this, and had given her some indication that it was going to be, the title of the video was something like, let me kill you like I kill you in the movies. And so if she knew, she had to have known that the tenor of this, the tone of this was going to be extremely disturbing. And he tells her ahead of time, she even concedes that he tells her ahead of time, you're going to have to get used to me manhandling you. Now, you may say, well, yeah, he says manhandle. He doesn't say, tie you up and whip you. But I don't know what he said to her. I don't know how he prepared her. We don't know what kinds of preparatory conversations they had. You think that, they're shooting this video, and just all of a sudden, randomly, he just drags her into a room and ties her up and starts whipping her with no preparatory talk? And what's also interesting is that Esme Bianco, I have read her testimony. I've read the article in the New Yorker magazine that came out this week. I've watched this Good Morning America interview that we're going to watch more of. I've seen her testimony at the California Assembly, where she was lobbying along with Evan Rachel Wood, for the Phoenix Act. So I'm very familiar with the entirety, I think, of her testimony on this matter. And what she never says, she never once says that she told him to stop. She never once says it. So I'm sorry, but this is a problem that I and others have with Me Too, and with sort of this new idea in feminism that women should not and cannot be expected to to strongly express their preferences, much less, really express them at all in this case. She never says that she told him to stop. She never even says that she told him she didn't like it. What she says is that she was perpetually surprised by these abusive things that kept happening, and then she keeps going back to him, and it just seems. But my point is that there's no indication from her that she ever told him to stop. And by the way, it's the same thing with Evan Rachel Wood's testimony. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I have never read in an interview with her, and I've not seen in her testimony that she ever said that she didn't want this to happen. Now, I ever said to Manson that stop, or I don't like this, whatever. Now, you might say, some of you might say, well, look, he's supposedly, whipping them and tying them up and sleep depriving them and all of these things. He didn't need someone to tell him to stop. He should have just not done these things. Well, by my judgment, maybe, by your judgment, maybe. But again, I don't understand the complexities of these far out, edgy relationships. And we're going to get into this later in the video, and I did in my last one too, but I just do not see the evidence that these women did not know what kind of a kinky, freaky guy he was. Or, I mean, you look every aspect of his life and the art that he likes to make and the things that he likes to talk about and so on and so forth. I mean, it's all dark. And yes, it could be indicative of some problem on his part, but the women in this, they do bear responsibility to at least verbalize. And, maybe they did, but I find it surprising and odd that we don't get that in any of their testimony. What we get is, and we'll look at it in a moment, is a depiction, that they depict themselves as being these almost mute, and just completely helpless, infantilized beings. And that's not true of the way that every victim of domestic violence presents themselves. I have a good friend who for a number of years, several years ago, was a victim of domestic violence and had a very violent boyfriend, and she finally got away from him. I do understand and we have some abuse issues in my family in the past as well, and I do understand cycles of abuse, and I understand people getting gaslighted and so on and so forth. But there are just some things that bother me about this, that I did not see this with my friend. Even when my friend was going back to the boyfriend, when they would get in these cycles and he would be violent and then she'd go back to him, there was always with her some sense of taking responsibility. Like, this is ridiculous. I've tried to leave him. I've told him this is no good, and so on and so forth. And I know he's an asshole and all of this. I have yet to see any of that in these women's testimony, any sense of even remote, agency. And I just don't think that's feminist. So yes, I understand that the nature of these cycles of abuse is that it's very difficult for women to leave and to assert themselves, and that they do get gaslit and beaten down and all of that. But I'm telling you that there's some things that don't make sense about this situation as it's being presented. So let's get back. I'm going to stop talking now. Let's get back to looking at more of this.
Bianco provided ABC News with this photo, which she says is her back, marked with whiplashes after the incident.
Now, I know that probably to a number of people, this seems like very conclusive evidence, right? And you might say, well, you just told me that you wanted evidence, and now look, she's showing you pictures. And I realize that in what I'm about to say, it is going to, look, I anticipate these critiques that people have, okay? I'm not an idiot. And in fact, every critique that I've gotten, like on the last video, they were all things that occurred to me at the time. I really should acknowledge this, or yeah, that's kind of could be a flaw in my thinking or whatever. So I just want to say, look, I can see the same picture you can see. It's a fucked up back, right? It looks like it was painful. Here's the thing, and I don't know, I hate to say this because some of you are going to think this is terrible and I'm saying this, but I don't know whose back I'm looking at here. I'm looking at a picture of someone's back that looks messed up. I don't know that I'm looking at some kind of authenticated photo. Is there a photo floating around that where we can see that it is clearly her, or where we know, where she got this or what the context was? Because one of the things that Esme talks about in the article, the interview that she did in New York Magazine, is that she had experience, it sounds like fairly extensive experience with BDSM. She alludes to it and fetish stuff, and I don't know really very much about that stuff, but I don't know. I don't know. Again, there's seeing some marks on someone's back in a photo. I don't know what that's indicating. And I'm sorry if that seems to some of you like I'm being deliberately obtuse, like someone said in one of their comments. I get that. But I'm just telling you what I think and feel, right? I'm not saying you have to think it and feel it. I'm not saying it needs to be everyone's thoughts and feelings, okay? I'm not Marilyn Manson's attorney. I'm not his spokesperson. He's not paying me, despite what one of you asked. Someone asked me, said, girl, who's paying you? Well, I wish someone would. No, I've gotten a few tips. It's nice. But you know, Marilyn, if you're listening, give me a call. No, I'm just joking. Okay, so anyway, back to this. Let's watch this.
At any point, did you ask him to stop?
No. I would never have dared to ask him to stop.
Feared for your life?
Now, she says, I would have never dared to ask him to stop. Why? I mean, why? That would, because, you know, and you might say, well, okay, in that moment when he's hitting her, when he's whipping her or whatever, she was afraid for her life. Well, I understand, but what they're about to tell us is that after this thing happened, where she felt like he could beat her to death and whatever, she keeps dating him. And it's not like they were already deeply into a relationship where she was already sucked into this cycle, okay? Like, this is the very beginning of their relationship. They had been friends for years, but this is the start of, basically, of their relationship. And so if your relationship starts with someone tying you up against your will and beating you until you have scars on your back, and then you're going to continue to actively, it sounds like, pursue a relationship with that person. I mean, do I even have to say that this doesn't make any kind of sense? And I'm sure there's domestic violence advocates who are going to tell me that it makes perfect sense, it happens all the time or whatever. Well, again, all I can say to you is that my gut feeling is that there's something wrong. But maybe that's not worth much. I don't know.
Was there ever a point where you feared for your life?
The entire time during that shoot.
Over the following 2 years, she says their relationship became sexual.
Okay, so wait a minute. Did they not even have sex when this shoot was going on? So basically what we're meant to understand is that he lured this woman there for the express purposes of sadistic sexual satisfaction, and then he didn't have sex with her that weekend. He had this one single episode where at the end of filming this movie, he ties her up in this very aestheticized, artistic way and beats her. And we're meant to think that that was the extent of what he had planned for. I mean, it just, again, I don't quite understand. And then it says over the next 2 years, then they develop a sexual relationship. So the point is, like I said earlier, it's not like she had already just totally fallen for this guy and they had established a life and she was sucked into this cycle that domestic violence victims get sucked into. She was at the very beginning. They hadn't even had sex yet. And he ties her up supposedly and beats her against her will, and she's afraid for her life so much that she can't even tell him to stop, and yet she's gonna go. I mean, come on. I'm sorry, but come on.
He would hide abuse by doing it during sex, basically. He always went too far, the biting. That was 100% non-consensual.
It is not necessarily on the man all the time to be constantly checking in with the woman and, and saying, okay, now can I do this? Can I do that? I mean, you're dating Marilyn Manson. Okay, is it a shocker that he's going to bite? So if you don't like it, you say no. But the way that she says it was non-consensual, she makes it sound like, again, it was something where she didn't want it, but she didn't express that she didn't want to.
And he would bite me till I was black and blue.
Why continue to go back?
I thought he was in love with me. I did not understand that what was happening to me was very, very wrong. And because he was incredibly manipulative. Why didn't I just run? What was I doing? It's not until we truly understand, what psychological abuse and gaslighting does to somebody that you can fathom why I would have stayed.
Then in 2011, with the promise of a committed relationship with Manson, she says, she moved into his Los Angeles apartment. Bianco says months of controlling and abusive behavior by Manson culminated in one terrifying night.
He took an axe and he started smashing holes in the walls, and then he started chasing me with the axe. And at that point, I thought, he's going to kill me.
ABC News spoke with a former assistant of Manson's, Ashley Walters, who said she saw Manson chase Bianco through the apartment with an axe and recalled seeing bruises on Bianco's body while she was living there.
Now, you might say, oh, look here, there's corroboration. There is Manson's former personal assistant, her name's Ashley Walters, who is corroborating this, that she saw him chasing Bianco through the house with an axe. She also came out on Instagram and corroborated other things. All right, so again, if this were a normal case of like Joe Blow down the street and he's got all of these women turning against him, then I would say it has more credibility. But again, there's some things you need to understand. And I'm not saying, again, that this means that people are lying. Maybe everything that they're saying about Manson is true. I don't know. But this is the issue I have, is that Ashley is a disgruntled former employee. And she has only pretty recently changed her tune on Manson, because even after she supposedly, he had been making her life difficult and so on and so forth, and being a harassing boss and everything, like, she continued for years to promote her relationship with him and post pictures on Instagram of her time, working for him and so on and so forth. And again, it's this pretty recent, this shift. And she is a disgruntled employee, which doesn't necessarily mean someone is lying. But she's also, though, Esme Bianco's really good friend. So you have to understand that these accusers, they are also friends. And Ashley, there's all these pictures going back years of Ashley and Esme. And in fact, when Marilyn Manson was out of town one time, this was years ago, he was out of town and Esme and Ashley took his Jaguar for a spin and ended up totaling it or wrecking it. And so, my point being that you have to understand that these are not like disconnected and disinterested parties here that are accusing him of things. This is, and we'll talk about this more in a little while, but this is a coordinated thing, and that doesn't necessarily make it untrue, but it is, again, something that's in a celebrity case like this, a notorious case like Marilyn Manson, it raises an eyebrow. Recently, a woman who met and spent some time with Marilyn Manson one weekend, she goes by Greta Aurora, and she's made several videos on YouTube supporting Marilyn Manson and talking about her experience with him and so forth. But one of the things that has come out is that a good friend of Evan Rachel Wood's, it's actually rumored to be her girlfriend, but I don't know about that. But a good friend of Evan Rachel Wood's was emailing any women who had had any experiences with Marilyn Manson, and and apparently she emailed this Greta Aurora woman. You can see this email here, and inquiring, trying to get her to speak with her about the Phoenix Act. And of course, the Phoenix Act, as we've talked about, is this piece of domestic violence legislation that Evan Rachel Wood had a hand in writing. And so basically what's going on here, it seems like what's been going on here is that you have people close to Evan Rachel Wood who have been going around and trying to basically come up with any women from Marilyn Manson's past, even women that he just briefly dated or had encounters with, or hung out with, or what have you, to try to find more accusers. And so what does this mean? Does it mean that these accusations against him are automatically false because of that? No, it doesn't mean that necessarily. But what it does show is that, again, there are connections here that we're not exactly totally privy to. And I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And it's not like you have all of these different random women who just happen to be coming out at the same time. This is a kind of a media rollout, a kind of a campaign. And while I don't know for sure what's happened, there is reason, again, there's just reason to be somewhat suspicious. Okay. And that's all I'm saying.
Bianco's attorney provided a statement saying she's been interviewed by and given evidence to federal investigators about her allegations against Manson.
Now, here's something else that I want you to understand. This is her attorney who is claiming that she has given evidence to federal investigators. The federal investigators themselves, they have not confirmed this. They say that they never confirm investigations to the media. So, again, I'm not saying the lawyer is lying, but I just want you to understand the source. And also, we don't know what that evidence is. We have not seen conclusive evidence, all right? And I know that Evan Rachel Wood claims that she has a lot and that she tried to show it to the government, and they're claiming that Esme has shown this to the government. But again, we don't know, all right? Again, I'm just arguing for some evidence, that we need some evidence and that we just can't just believe this, all right?
Her lawyer says Manson's treatment of Bianco, including asking her to travel across international borders, constitutes human trafficking.
I was defrauded. I was transported from the UK to the US. I was harbored, and then I was coerced into involuntary servitude, which included sexual abuse and physical abuse.
All right, here's where I have a problem. Again, the thing that I don't like about a number of these high-profile Me Too narratives, not all of them, right? I'm not talking about like Weinstein, for instance, but these Me Too narratives where it just seems like there's absolutely no agency given, no sense of self-determination or even basic intelligence at times on the part of the stories that some of these women are giving us. I mean, she is claiming that that she was trafficked. I'm sorry, but it's just laughable. Okay. She came over to LA freely to move in with her boyfriend, and it didn't work out eventually, as it often doesn't work out, especially if you're dealing with someone who, yes, is obviously probably pretty unstable, like Marilyn Manson. I mean, come on. But she was not financially destitute. She did have financial means. She was not enslaved. She was not in that kind of a powerless position. And it's really, it goes beyond being laughable to really being, I think, this makes me angry. I don't know, you know what? I don't know how much of the rest of her story is true, and maybe all of it is true. But even if all of it is true, the way that she is presenting herself here, asserting that she was trafficked and so forth, when she came over, because honestly, I think that she wanted to date this rock star, and she did some things sexually or in terms of the sadomasochism or whatever that she didn't enjoy at the time, or that maybe she hated at the time, but she never spoke up about. And then the relationship soured, and now she's making these accusations. She has an attorney, and the attorney is really pushing hard on this whole narrative that she was trafficked and defrauded as well. Interesting, defrauded. It's almost like someone might be kind of interested in the financial angle on this, because it's a very strange thing. Of course, she said she was defrauded, that he brought her over with promises of doing things for her professionally. Well, you know what? She was starring in Game of Thrones at the time, which to this point was her greatest professional success that she's ever had. All right. And so she was not doing badly. She was actually at the apex, entering the apex of her career when she was dating Marilyn Manson. And so she would have us believe, she and her attorney would have us believe that she was this destitute, financially dependent, woman who was tricked into coming across the Atlantic, and so where she would be enslaved by this evil, boyfriend. Come on, that entire narrative is ridiculous. It just is ridiculous. Even if the abuse did happen that she describes, that is a ridiculous assertion, and it's infantilizing to women, and it is one of those things that makes me really reluctant to believe, honestly, any of this, because it seems like so much of it is being served up to us in this sort of, modern day Me Too, jump the shark, and infantilization of women where there's just no, we're just supposed to believe all of this and just absolve the women from any responsibility to think or express anything. No, I'm sorry. We're not, in this case, talking about a teenager. We're talking about a grown-ass woman, and she comes across the Atlantic of her own free will so that she hopes things will work out with her rock star boyfriend, and it turns out, you know, he's a nutcase. And in all that time, she still never tells him no. Doesn't make sense. And, you know, thinking about Esme's credibility, you know, her Instagram, she has posted, not recently, but she has posted in the past a number of pictures that indicate a strong interest in kink and fetishism and BDSM and that sort of thing. So again, the idea that it's not a far-fetched idea to think that Marilyn Manson thought it was totally okay to do these kinky or BDSM or aggressive or violent acts as a part of shooting that music video on the last day. And it's also not far-fetched to think that in their relationship, he thought that she was okay with all of this stuff. Again, like she doesn't tell us that she ever said no. So you have someone who is with Esme, you have someone who is very familiar with and a part of that whole world of fetishism and so forth, and kinky sex and all of that, personally and professionally, and has advertised it before on her Instagram page, and yet now is presenting this idea that she didn't know what she was getting into with Manson, and that, you know, it was something that was just out of nowhere. So again, we have to think critically about these things. All right. I want to actually look now, before we move along from Esme's rock solid testimony, to look at her New York interview. All right, so understand that the article I'm about to read to you, and I am just going to read it to you instead of putting it up on the screen, but because it's so much editing work for me to do that and go back and forth to my reaction. So anyway, point is, I'm going to read through this, and again, just I want to comment on some things because I think that there's stuff in this interview that's even more in this article. I keep calling it an interview. I'm sorry, they interviewed her for this article, but there's so many things in here that I just. Again, I don't know. So it says, as a teenager in the late 90s, Esme Bianco was a huge Marilyn Manson fan. And then it goes on to describe, I'm not going to read it for you, this part, but it goes on to describe how she was this huge Marilyn Manson fan when she was a teenager. It says 7 years later, when Bianco got the chance to meet Manson in person, she was thrilled. But she says the encounter led to years of psychological torment and violence that derailed her acting career and left her with physical scars and PTSD. Now, the mention here of derailing the acting career, that's going to come up again in a moment, and I have a little bit of a problem with this too. We'll see. She says he went from being a massive role model who really helped her through some incredibly dark and difficult times as a teenager to a, quote, monster who almost destroyed me and almost destroyed so many women. And then it goes on, the article goes on to describe sort of the basic background of this and Evan Rachel Wood's accusations and so on and so forth. All right. It's really surreal, she says over Zoom from her Los Angeles living room. The 38-year-old redhead takes off her glasses and wipes away a tear. Talking about Manson sends her body into flight mode, but more recently, it also fills her with what she calls a dragon-like strength. Dragon-like. Now, what is this a reference to? Game of Thrones. I mean, do you see how obvious, and again, I'm faulting the media for this as well, but do you see how obvious this is? They're trying to tie it in with the Game of Thrones stuff again. I mean, this is not real news. This is sensationalized news as entertainment, which, you know, we know is a thing. It's everywhere. Anyway, she says it fills her with what she calls a dragon-like strength. Quote, I have this hot energy and power in my chest. I just want to open my mouth and be like, ah, and rain fire down. she tells me, sticking out her tongue and waving both hands. All right, so I don't know. I know that a number of people would say, well, good for her. She's a domestic abuse survivor, so whatever way she wants to express the strength that she feels now, great. But again, all I can tell you is how it strikes me, and it strikes me as being strange. It's a strength Bianco says she didn't have while playing Roz, a character on Game of Thrones who works in a brothel and is abused in ways that mirror the actress's personal life. So, okay, again, here, they're just gonna really lean into this Game of Thrones metaphor just so that they can make this article like really, cool. So she talks about this and a bit, and then it gets into the meat of the story here, all right? And this is where I'm most interested in it. It says, Bianco met Manson in 2005 through his then-fiancée, Dita Von Teese. Both women are burlesque performers, and Von Teese said the rock star wanted to meet Bianco. And so she talks about her excitement to meet him. She says that Manson wanted to cast her in Phantasmagoria, the horror film he had planned to make based on the works of Lewis Carroll. And she says that now I keep that in mind. So Phantasmagoria is a movie that Manson very much wanted to make, and it just never got off the ground to the extent that it was made. It was one of those works in progress. And this is important because of something that Esme is going to claim in a moment. So keep this in mind, that he had this project that he was working on for a long time. It was going to be this big film project that he was going to be very proud of, but it didn't end up really totally getting off the ground. So she talks about, how after Manson's divorce, that they kept in touch and they had this friendship, and she said they would exchange sometimes flirty emails, but she says their relationship was platonic and she got married the next year. All right. Now, it says that dynamic changed in 2009 after Manson sent Bianco a plane ticket from her home in London to LA. Now, this is where that's going to describe this encounter that she's already described, where he tells her they're going to film a movie, and then he ties her up and he whips her on that last day when they're filming the last scene. It says Manson sent Bianco a plane ticket from her home in London to LA so she could star in the music video for his song, I Want to Kill You Like They Do in the Movies. He explained that it would be shot on a flip camera for a home video feel and would involve Manson kidnapping Bianco in his home. She says that Manson said, quote, I need to have a victim or a lover. He wrote in an email. He said, quote, you are going to have to pretend to like being manhandled by me. Sorry. Now, look, maybe he didn't, and again, we don't know what he said. I have a feeling he prepared her better than this. That's just my own personal belief. But he says here, look, basically, we're going to do a video in which you are going to be the victim, and sorry, you're going to have me manhandle you. To me, what that would indicate, especially given that it's Marilyn Manson, is that, okay, there's probably going to be something scary or physically uncomfortable or problematic about this. And I would think, that they would have had more of a conversation about it. But you know what? Maybe not. So she says, once she arrived, she says, the line between art and reality immediately blurred. Bianco, who was 26 at the time, okay, 26, this is what I was talking about, all right? So when this first bad thing happened to her, she was not a teenager. Those of you who've been saying that there were some people who said that he only does this kind of shady stuff with younger people, that he can manipulate. Well, this was not a younger woman. I'm sorry, by any definition, even the way in which, the younger generations now are developmentally stunted, I'm sorry, but the 26 is a grown woman and certainly should be expected to have some sense of agency, okay, in this. And so anyway, it says she was 26 at the time. She spent the next 3 days in lingerie. Oh, the horror, lingerie. She says, next 3 days in lingerie, barely eating or sleeping, with Manson serving up cocaine rather than food. Okay, I like the way that they mention barely eating and sleeping as if, to make us imagine that he's starving her and that there's this sleep deprivation that some of the victims like to have brought up, that's occurring. But wait a minute, then they give us this detail at the end of the sentence. that he'd been serving up cocaine all weekend. Well, you know what? Some people would consider that to be a good host. Hey, come to my house and I will give you unlimited amounts of cocaine. Again, it may not be everyone's cup of tea. I'm not saying that it's my cup of tea either. I just wouldn't turn it down. But no, seriously, come on. They were up. Can you read between the lines on what may have been going on here? Is that he brings her over for them to shoot this artistic video, and he likes cocaine, and so they stay up all weekend doing cocaine. So yes, she wasn't eating much, and yes, she wasn't sleeping much. All right. I'm still, we haven't gotten to, I know, the bad part yet, but I'm just wanting you to be aware of how, and you know this, right? I mean, everything you read in the media, left, right, center, and apolitical, whatever, like it's always got a slant. And the problem is when people don't realize that, they don't read critically. All right, so it says Manson serving up cocaine rather than food. She remembers him losing his temper and throwing the camera at a smoke alarm. Oh my God, he threw the camera at a smoke alarm? Oh, the horror. All right. Soon, she says, he became violent. Okay, so here's the climax. Now, understand again, like I said earlier, she's already been there. She's there for 3 days, okay? And so far, no violence has occurred, except he's thrown the camera at a smoke alarm. So this is this like out of control, sadistic, horrible man that we are led to believe is such an abuser and such a threat. And nothing basically has happened until the very last scene, okay? So soon, she says, he became violent, tying her with cables to a prayer kneeler, lashing her with a whip, and using an electric sex toy called a violent wand on her wounds. The same kind of torture device Wood has said was used on her. Now, we don't have time for me to get into talking about the violet wand. I did do some research on it, and it's depicted as being this torture device. And no, I'm sure that it's not pleasant if you're not into it, but it basically, from what I read, it gives off a sensation of like a kind of a static electricity type shock. Now, maybe someone will correct me on that and say that it's worse. But again, what I'm trying to point out to you is that you have to, again, be aware of how everything is being contextualized and slanted a certain way for you. So I don't know, I'm mistrustful of these characterizations because I've seen how in other ways they're slanting things. And from what I read up on the violent wand, and I even saw a demonstration video, maybe I'll put it in here, where a guy is being shocked by one. It doesn't look like something that is just this awful torture device. And again, she wasn't saying no, and she's here for this extreme video, and she doesn't claim that she says no. So again, I don't know. I mean, okay. So anyway, she says. Bianco was terrified, but tried to calm down by telling herself, it's just Manson being theatrical. We're going to make great art. Again, no mention of saying no or voicing any kind of... She doesn't even indicate that she told him she was in pain. While waiting for her flight back home, Bianco sobbed. At the time, she felt sad to leave Manson and considered her wounds to be proof of their bond. Now, notice this. This is interesting. This is kind of a strange tell, actually. It says that she was sobbing. And of course, what do you think at first? You think that she's sobbing because she's just been through this traumatic experience. But then what does it say? The sentence right after that, it says that she felt sad to leave Manson and considered her wounds to be proof of their bond. She's crying because it says basically she's crying because she doesn't want to leave. So again, like it's kind of contradicting even itself, this article. On some level, and so then it gets into how it says that she realizes on some level that this wasn't healthy, typical BDSM practice where you have safe words, and says that she went back home and she mentioned nonchalantly to her roommate what had happened, and her roommate was a fetish artist, so is into this stuff, and the roommate said, well, you shouldn't be actually physically injured, it's never about actual physical injury, and so on and so forth, and that's what the roommate claims. Again, You know, what's interesting is that she's even acting, the roommate even says that she acted nonchalant, right? So far, the indications that we're getting is one of someone who is not speaking up to anyone, voicing a complaint with this, all right? And again, I know that that could be happening in cases of legitimate abuse and domestic violence, but in the absence of evidence, and given, again, the particularities of this situation and who Manson is and everything, again, we can have skepticism. We can have quite a bit of skepticism. All right, so it talks about, it says that Manson never sent her footage from that trip, and she says he made constant excuses for not yet releasing the video. And he never released the video. Now, this is depicted here as being something sinister. And what they're trying to say here is that he never had any intention of this actually being a legitimate movie or a legitimate project. And he merely used it as a pretext to get this woman here so that he could get his sadistic kicks out of whipping her and, you know, keeping her up with cocaine all weekend. And so they would have us believe that, yes. But then, remember what I told you about the Phantasmagoria movie? That there was this major movie that Manson was preparing for and excited about, and was prepping and I think even shot footage for, and it just never finally got off the ground. So this is not unusual for Manson or for other artists to have various projects in the works, either mainstream projects or kind of their own offbeat, you know, even personal stuff. But anyway, it is not unusual for them to have projects that don't pan out. And we know this because it already happened with Manson. It happened with ended up happening with Phantasmagoria. And so, you know, it's entirely possible to me that he really did consider himself shooting a music video or the makings of a music video, and it was a legitimate art project, especially again since they didn't have sex, okay, and since they only got violent at the very end in this sort of climactic scene that he had warned her to some degree, it sounds like, about. And so my point is, just because the movie was never finished, just because he didn't give her the footage, I don't know necessarily what that means, okay? All right, then it says that after all of this, they began a long-distance affair. Now, look, I'm not going to shame somebody who is married to someone and is cheating on them, because there are circumstances where I think that is understandable, and honestly, whether you're cheating on someone or not doesn't mean that you deserve to be abused. It doesn't at all, right? However, they just this article just sort of quickly passes over these things. I guess what I'm trying to say to you is, it's not like this woman did not have other avenues of support in her life. I just don't see it. And so they began a long-distance affair. He would visit her on his trips to London and arrange for her to travel and stay at hotels in LA. It says in March, now this is the part where she says she's trafficked. This is what she contends is her trafficking. In March 2011, 2 years after the music video shoot, Manson asked Bianco to move in with him and promised to help her get a visa while she figured out her acting career. To help with the immigration paperwork, his team gave her a written agreement stating that she would star as a nurse in his forthcoming feature film. Oh, this is where it's mentioned, Phantasmagoria, with rehearsal starting in mid-July. At that point, she remembers, her eyelashes were falling out from stress, and she was having daily panic attacks, all of which she chalked up to being apart from Manson, the man she thought she was in love with. Now, again, I thought that they were going to say that her eyelashes and stuff were falling out because she was in this, she had this abusive experience and was in this, sucked into this cycle. But it says, no, it's actually because she missed being away from him. Okay. She'd also recently filmed the first Game of Thrones season and was keen to land bigger Hollywood roles. She would end up being in 3 seasons of Game of Thrones. There was nothing left to lose, so she thought, why not jump off the cliff and hope that something catches me? Within roughly a week, Bianco had left her husband and moved from London to Manson's West Hollywood apartment. And so, as she describes it, I'm not going to finish this because don't have all the time in the world, and I do want to move on to some other stuff. But this is what she says was her trafficking, being trafficked. He says, come to LA. I'll help you out with your visa. which it sounds like he did. Okay, and then instead of being financially destitute, she ends up landing what would be the biggest role of her career. I mean, this is not some woman who was like this like poor, infantilized, extremely like vulnerable, no sense of agency, no other support system in her life. Nothing. No. It just doesn't make sense. Okay. Anyway, the point is, she and Evan Rachel Wood did this testimony in front of some California legislators trying to get this Phoenix Act passed. And the Phoenix Act is this piece of legislation that Evan Rachel Wood basically created and wrote and was promoting to extend the statute of limitations on sex crimes or domestic violence. Okay. Anyway, the point is, I want to look at Esme's testimony, a bit of her testimony, and then I also want to look at Evan Rachel Wood's. And there's several things that I want to point out.
Before he succeeded in his seduction, my abuser carefully groomed me, manipulating and gaslighting me over a number of years of friendship. He knew that I was easy prey. I had neither power nor control over my life. A previous intimate relationship had stripped me of both, and so I was led from the frying pan into the fire. Initially, he was charming, intelligent, funny. He told me I was his soulmate. By the time I was living with him, he controlled every aspect of my life.
When I was a teenager, I met a man. I looked up to him in many ways and felt like we had a special bond, and I had no intention of it turning into something romantic. When it eventually did, I wasn't sure how to stop it, as he had a certain charisma and power, and I quickly surrendered to his charms.
She says he had a certain charisma and appeal, and I quickly surrendered to his charms. Now, the image that she's painting of herself is of someone with absolutely like almost like an automaton, like something, or a puppet that's just completely controlled by someone else. And I'm sorry, but that is not the impression that's given off in the interviews that she did at the time. And I know people, say, well, maybe those are worth nothing. She's just putting on. And she certainly could have. But again, it's a contradiction. We do have these contradictions that I said in my last video. I don't know what they mean. But to assume that he must be guilty when we do have these contradictions, it's problematic, to say the least. And so, if you, and you can go and look at it yourself, and you can listen to my other video on this, but if you read the interviews that she did that Evan Rachel Wood did while she was dating Marilyn Manson, and even after some of them, she talks in a very sort of like strong, free way about how she, was attracted to this edginess, and she was looking for, danger and excitement, and that it was a very healthy relationship. She said this in interviews, that people would be surprised at how healthy their relationship was, and that he was supportive, and that she became a musician partly because of him and through his support, and that he also ensured that when she did that music video with him, the heart-shaped glasses, this is music video that they did when they started dating, and that it said in this article, she said that he ensured that she would be paid more than any actress had been paid up to that point to be in a music video. That was very important to him. I mean, it's just, I know that relationships can be complex, they can be multifaceted, and you can project one thing or experience one thing and then also be terrorized, especially when there's drugs and alcohol or whatever involved. And again, it's very possible, but the waters are very muddy on this in terms of their contradictions all over the place with everybody, including Marilyn Manson, right? And, someone brought up his autobiography, so I want to address that here. Comment after comment saying that, look, how do you even doubt that he did these things when all you have to do is read his autobiography, Manson's autobiography, and see all of the sick things that he did? Well, here's the thing about the autobiography is that it's probably fiction, and the juiciest parts are probably fictionalized. And I realize that is a convenient thing for me to assert if I'm arguing that we should give his innocence the benefit of the doubt. It fits in with my argument to say that. Why am I taking Evan Rachel Wood's interviews seriously if I'm not taking Manson's autobiography seriously? I don't know which to take seriously and which not to. I guess that's what I'm saying. But there are really strong indications that his autobiography is fictionalized. I don't trust Trent Reznor really as far as I could throw him, because he seems like a sleazebag to me. So I don't know why so many people are touting him and his opinion of Manson. But anyway, that's just I don't know. I could be Trent Reznor fans. You can come after me on that and tell me I'm wrong. I don't know. That's just always been my impression of the guy, was that he was a douchebag, but maybe he's not. I still like the music. But where was I going with that? Other than him being a douchebag. So anyway, he said that it was fictionalized, that the things that were written about him, particularly the thing about sexually assaulting someone, was fiction. And you might say, well, yeah, he's going to say that. But I did research on this. Like, I looked up like reviews of the book when it came out and what people were saying about it, and how there were all of these people who were in the book, and not necessarily just depicted negatively, but all these people who were like, yeah, that couldn't have happened then because he wasn't even there, or, like these big errors in the book. And here's the thing you have to understand too, is that his autobiography was ghost written. And look, whenever a book says, I have some experience, let me just say I have some experience in this industry. And whenever a book is ghost written, it's basically like, I hate to say it, but it's basically like saying like written by, with like maybe, with some stories. This is what happens, is that the subject will tell some stories, but the ghost writer will really often embellish it a lot, especially if it's someone sensational like a rock star, right? Like, this is not the memoirs of the president or something, former president or something. So here's the thing. It was done, the ghostwriter was Neil Strauss. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Neil Strauss's book, The Game. But anyway, if you have, you'll understand it's very much written the same way, with these really outlandish, crazy stories, probably most of which didn't happen. Anyway, my point, and I'm going to speak more softly because I'm keeping someone up, I think, next to me. So I'm sorry if you have to adjust the volume, but I will be speaking more softly here. Maybe you'll like it better, actually. The person who told me they didn't like my vocal fry. I really do try. I'm kind of like AH, in that I do try to lower my voice, because actually I do speak in a high-pitched voice. But anyway, enough of that bullshit. Back to what we're talking about here. So Neil Strauss, so he wrote The Game and has all these outlandish stories about his time as a player, so to speak, in the sex and dating world. And so he was interviewing Manson after Manson had finally, hit it big in the music industry. Strauss worked for Rolling Stone, and he interviewed Manson. And it was through this interview and the two of them striking up a friendship that they decided that they would write this book. And Manson has said in interviews that his intention was to basically try to create a character much like David Bowie created a character. Let's look at this clip from a Larry King interview from, I don't know, a year or so ago.
Tell me tell me the shtick. How did you become Marilyn Manson?
Well, we might have this in common. I was moved to Florida with my father, and my first job that I could get, I conned my way into becoming a music journalist in Florida. So I interviewed a lot of people.
Where, Miami?
Yeah, in Miami. It was a magazine called 25th Parallel. And by the time I was 19, I was a senior editor. And I was also most of the other writers. So the very first interview with Marilyn Manson was conducted by Brian Warner. So
you interviewed yourself?
Yeah, and I didn't have any songs yet. So I sort of set that deadline.
How did you come up with the Marilyn Manson thing?
Well, it was the obvious watching, at the time, all the Phil Donahues and Jerry Springer, before Jerry Springer. But, the fact that I was born in 1969, and that was the year that the Beatles, and Charles Manson, and Marilyn Monroe. I just remember as a kid, Marilyn Monroe, fake name, Charles Manson, fake name. You put the two together, it's like abracadabra, and it really describes American culture altogether. Marilyn Manson, you've got light and dark.
But you take the name of a notorious villain.
Well, she wasn't a villain.
No, he. Good line, Marilyn. Now, how did the makeup come about? Why the lipstick? Why glass? Why I can see myself talking to you?
Well, the lipstick's good, though, because then if you come home with lipstick on your collar, if you were a white-collar job man, then you don't have to,
Good thinking.
See, it's always got to keep the...
But, I mean, why did you go this route?
Being a fan of Bowie, Prince, Alice Cooper, of course, and even Madonna. I don't know. I think it's probably, I wrote a book before I was famous, really, an autobiography, and that sort of turned me into being more popular by making the book. It was sort of what Bowie did with Ziggy Stardust, who came to America and said that he was something bigger than he was.
So again, do we take the autobiography at face value? I think that given the fact that not only that this is what Manson has said about it, but also the nature of the ghostwriter, and I have read some of the autobiography. I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but I've read some of the autobiography, and I've also read some of the game, and it just sounds like the same kind of stuff, honestly. Just obviously more disturbing in the Manson book. And then of course we have all of these people who claim who should know because they're discussed in the book, or things that they knew happened, that they were around to see, were discussed in the book, and they've said that it's fiction. So we don't know for sure, and I'm not totally dismissing the autobiography either. I'm just saying again that the waters are muddy in this whole affair. And I have to say, actually, if I'm going to talk about how women need to be taking responsibility for their actions and their part in things, I think, of course, it is a valid thing to recognize that, that in some ways, what Marilyn Manson is experiencing, even if it is unjust, if it turns out to be unjust, what he is experiencing, it is kind of a side effect of the kind of status that he has pursued of being the ultimate envelope pusher, the ultimate freak, the ultimate crazy, satanic, disturbing, whatever, put in whatever words you want. And he has certainly lived his life in a way that has shown great disregard for the rules and the mores that most of us mere mortals have to abide by. And that's why so many people look up to him too, right? Because he's that kind of Nietzschean symbol. But my point being is that, look, there are realities in this world. There's cause and effect, and I don't like it often any more than anyone else does. But if it does merit being said that if you were going to spend decades presenting yourself to the world as Marilyn Manson has presented himself to the world, it is not surprising when eventually it catches up with you and people take it seriously. And so I do want to say that, and please, those of you who, I'm not changing my tune on this. I'm not saying that he deserves to be canceled, and I'm not saying that he's guilty. And I see, like I said, contradictions everywhere for everyone, and things that don't make sense. And so, again, it's just not a settled case, and people are making it out, in my opinion, they're making it seem as if it's a settled case, and that you're crazy, or you're sexist, or you're committing some kind of a psychological violation against assault victims by not taking these stories at face value, especially given the number of accusers. But the thing is, again, I went through, just the other day, all of the different accusations that I know there's a number of them, all right? I went through them all, and there's something about, I have to say, there's something about pretty much every one of them that I find problematic. And I'm not going to go through all of them. I wish that I had time. I thought about doing that, actually, but I just don't have time, and I do want to move on to other topics with my videos. But just like what I've done talking about Esme's interviews and testimony, I mean, I feel like you can see these kinds of flaws in the others, and I know that assault victims don't have to have like perfect stories. Okay, I get that. But again, I'm tired of these cliches that make people afraid to speak their mind and to speak from their gut. And there are things that just personally in my gut, they don't feel right about this. Again, as I look at my other video, if this is your first video of mine, look at my other video on Marilyn Manson and the situation, because again, the particulars of his persona and how he presented himself to the world and how other people thought about him and our culture's image of him and all of these things, and the way that he lived his life in a very edgy, kind of dangerous way. All of these things could serve to make him an easy target and an attractive target for people. And I don't doubt that he treated these women in shitty ways, because, you know, why else would they be doing this? Well, they are also getting a lot of media out of it and stuff, but, you know, again, they might have legitimate reasons for feeling aggrieved with him. You know, I really don't doubt, it wouldn't be surprising to me that he was a shitty boyfriend, or that he kind of, you know, uses people and then discards them, or that he lies to girlfriends, or that he cheated on girlfriends, or that, you know, some of this sex stuff went further than it should. I just don't know. There's nothing that I know that I feel like I know in this case beyond some sense of great doubt. And I see just as many indications, or just as many reasons to believe Manson as I do to believe the accusers. So we're going to get back to the Evan Rachel Wood testimony.
In the beginning, he treated me like a princess. I was smart, but a smart 18-year-old is still an 18-year-old, and I thought I had fell in love. It wasn't until much later that I realized everything he had told me was a lie and part of what is called the grooming process. He'd hidden a terrible drug and alcohol problem from me. He moved very fast in the relationship, asking me to move in with him almost immediately.
All right, I'm sorry, but this, I don't understand. This is just totally baffling to me. Her testimony is that he hid this drug problem from her. I'm sorry, but I mean, I think that, you know, I think everybody knew, and I think he was very open about the fact, and has always been open about the fact that he's done and he does hard drugs, and drugs of every kind. And I just don't know what she's talking about. It strains credibility. It's beyond the limits of my credulity. And the problem here is that if I cannot trust what someone is saying in one part of their story, then yes, I know that they don't have to, that assault victims don't have to have perfect stories, but come on, there are like fundamental problems that I'm seeing here. I mean, am I crazy? It could be, you know, but this is what I see.
By the time I realized I was in a bad situation, I felt completely trapped and terrified for my life. He gifted me a cell phone, which I found out he was monitoring. He downloaded spyware onto my computer and hacked into my emails and social media accounts so I could not reach out for help. When my friends and family tried to intervene, I swiftly told them to leave because I was afraid of what he would do. He broke me down through means of starvation, sleep deprivation, and threats against my life, sometimes with deadly weapons, which would result in me having severe panic attacks where I was unable to breathe or stop shaking. Sometimes he would not allow me to sleep until I participated in acts of fear, pain, torture, and humiliation, which I felt powerless to stop. In some of these tapes, which he also videotaped, in some of these tapes, he can be heard threatening to kill me, threatening my friends, or threatening to kill members of my family. He also threatened to leak parts of the footage or photographs he had taken as a way to keep me quiet. I mustered the courage to leave several times, but he would call my house incessantly and threaten to kill himself. On one occasion, I returned to try and defuse the situation. He cornered me in our bedroom and asked me to kneel while he tied me up by my hands and feet. Once I was restrained, he beat me and shocked sensitive parts of my body with a torture device called a violet wand.
Now, I know that all of this stuff on its face, it sounds so bizarre, it sounds so horrible or whatever, the things that she's describing. And again, if we take it at face value, yes, a situation where this man would lure women in under a pretense that he's a nice guy and that he's not interested in kinky or dangerous sex, and then changes the script on them and is, you know, tying them up or playing these sex games with them. But that's not the situation that we have here, okay? It's not the situation. This guy, I mean, come on, look at this picture. I mean, everyone has always known what he is promoting. And I don't know what he's like in real life. You know, he claims that he's actually very like shy, and to me, anything is possible. But for her, again, this notion that there was not other context around this, that this was just a situation where this girl was just completely taken in and then forced into the situation. I just think that it seems more likely, given what we know from the interviews that she did at the time, where she even celebrates the idea of their kinky sexual relationship. There's this quote where she talks about how she loves doing that music video with him because there was the blood all over them and they're writhing around the bed, and she says something to the effect of, people need to understand that there's something cool about the dark side of romantic love, and she said again that she was looking for danger and so on and so forth. That does not jive then with this notion that she just sort of somehow found herself in the situation where she's tied up in a guy's closet and she's getting stung by a sex toy. And it's just, wow, I don't know how this happened or whatever. He just lured me. I mean, no, he's a walking advertisement for stuff like that. And as I said in my last video, I was an extremely naive and inexperienced teenager. And I had full awareness of what a relationship with Marilyn Manson would be like. This is exactly what I would have expected. Now, on the subject of Evan Rachel Wood's credibility, one of the things I want to mention as well, a week or so ago, she declared on Instagram that she had just recently filed a police report because she had been informed that Marilyn Manson's wife and a woman named Leslie Lane, who was on Instagram, were about to leak incriminating underage photos of Evan Rachel Wood. This is what Evan Rachel Wood said. And so she filed a police report about this and released one of the photos herself. Now, this person, Leslie Lane, is a mutual friend, or used to be a mutual friend of Evan Rachel Wood's and also of Marilyn Manson. Here you can see her in a photo with Marilyn Manson. She's posted this on her Instagram. And you can see from what Marilyn Manson is wearing that this was the same night when this photo was taken with him and Evan Rachel Wood. Now, this is the photo that Evan Rachel Wood made a big production of saying was her underage, and basically used this whole thing to make Marilyn Manson's wife and this woman, Leslie Lane, look bad. But what Leslie Lane is saying now on Instagram is that Evan Rachel Wood was not underage. And of course, what we know is that Evan Rachel Wood and Marilyn Manson, they didn't even meet until she was 18. So what I'm trying to say to you here, I know this might seem like a little thing or like, what's the point? And I'm sorry if it's a little confusing the way I'm presenting it. But I'm saying that this is something that Evan Rachel Wood appears to be lying about. And it seems to be an obvious lie, since everyone knows from numerous statements that have been made over the years that she and Manson didn't even meet until she was 18. They met at the Chateau Marmont. And so my point being, this is something that Evan Rachel Wood is publicly lying about. And it also is something, this lie is a way that she's trying to silence any potential opposition or anyone from her past that might make her look bad, such as this Leslie Lane person. And Leslie, she has been vocal on Instagram about the fact that she supports Marilyn Manson and that she doesn't believe Evan Rachel Wood, and that she thinks that this is a kind of a problematic conspiracy of sorts between these accusers. And I also want to say that, I don't know what's been going on behind the scenes, but it does really have the feeling, this all has the feeling of something that is heavily coordinated. And something else that I talked about a lot more in my other video, so I'm not going to belabor the point here. But, again, it's important to understand that the primary accuser here, Evan Rachel Wood, again, people say, what's her motivation or whatever? She already has a career and everything. Why does she need media coverage, or what's the deal? Well, I don't know. I never understand. Like I said, I can never know someone's motivations. What I can look at is it can see if there are inconsistencies or problems in their story, right? Or in what they're presenting. But I will say that if you look at her Instagram, and I'm not going to go over it here, but you can take a look yourself, and you can see that she has a long history now spanning several years of being an activist. And like I said, in regards to like Amber Heard, you gotta beware the actor and activist, and Evan Rachel Wood, she is getting a lot of mileage out of this story as an activist, and she wrote a bill that's become legislation and so on. And yes, maybe all of that is just a natural outgrowth of having been traumatized and abused, and now she's become a passionate advocate for victims. It totally could be. But again, I'm just trying to explain that I see problems in this story. I see inconsistencies and contradictions, and I'm trying to give you a reason as to why they may be there. And why would someone exaggerate or lie or misconstrue or rewrite their history or what happened to them in the past? I don't know, many reasons. But the actor-activist scenario, like we're seeing with Amber Heard, that is something to be concerned about. And Evan Rachel Wood, she has posted pictures on Instagram of her sliced up arms from cutting, from self-mutilation. And I understand that that can be something that's very empowering and freeing for people to feel like they don't have to be ashamed of those types of problems, and they can post these pictures and other people might take comfort from it. I understand that. But I also, there's another way to read that sort of incessant promotion of one's traumas and so forth. And again, I'm not going to spell it out for you if you don't know what I might be driving at, okay? But I'm just bringing it up, bringing it to your attention. And so, I don't know. I think that a number of them, their careers are lagging. Esme is an excellent example. And in terms of self-promotion, like I've said elsewhere in this video, Esme Bianco's career, from what I looked at on IMDb and from what that article about her that came out this week said, is that her career is really in trouble. And has been in trouble since Game of Thrones. And I noticed that she, is really promoting on her Instagram and her Twitter. She's promoting these interviews and so forth, and these and videos. She's promoting these things as if she's promoting a new film. And again, there's two ways to look at it. One way to look at it is that it's totally genuine. The other way to look at it, which we have to consider as well, is that it's self-serving and might be problematic. My point being that this is the most press that someone like Esme has gotten, and for the rest of these women, this is the most press that they'll ever get. And that goes for a number of the people too, jumping on the bandwagon with what I would consider to be insignificant complaints, like Phoebe Bridgers complaining that he made a joke about a rape room, or Jenna Jameson complaining that he bit, too much during sex. Now, I do, also the other thing I want to point out too is that we have to remember that Marilyn Manson, over the course of his career, his decades as a major rock star, that he has encountered so many people and has probably, I would imagine, had intimate sexual relationships with many, many women. And so while we look at the number, while it seems natural to look at the number of accusers in this case and say, God, look at this number of people. This is more than like one or two or three. You have to also look at it against the much, 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 much greater number of women that he's had encounters with, and people that he's had encounters with over the years, not just romantic or sexual, but just other things. People, one of the things that people bring up is that he's got this personal assistant who is attacking him, saying these things about him. He has someone who was on tour with him or something. Like there are these other people in his life who are saying these negative things. Yes, but again, the totality of who someone is, there are also some people that a number of us look up to who think the world of Marilyn Manson, one in particular that, again, I'm not going to name here. To me, I'm sorry, just to me, it means something. And I know people can show different faces to different people, but I'm just telling you, again, my reasoning, my gut feeling on this. So anyway, I don't know, that was kind of a ramble, but I hope you get the point of what I was getting at with all of that. And that, there are a number of women who also have come out and have said that they had positive experiences with Marilyn Manson, or that their experiences do not match the testimony of some of these accusers. And I talk about this in my other video as well. But his ex-wife Dita Von Teese and Rose McGowan have said that they did not experience this. And Rose McGowan, in her autobiography, and since then, has talked about how sweet he was and how great he was and how normal their lives were. And so Rose McGowan, again, we would expect of anybody for Rose McGowan to, if there was anything that she saw problematic or abusive with him, she would say it, and she's not. And of course, yes, people can be different with different people, I guess. But as I said in my last video, I also have some issues with that. So when we look at this, we see that there are a number of people who are attesting that they've had good relationships with him. Sharon Osbourne, who said she'd worked with him for many years, and in that capacity, he had always been respectful. And then again, the ex-wife and an ex-girlfriend who is an activist, who is a Me Too activist. And so what I'm trying to tell you is, yes, there are these accusers on this side, but on the other side, we also have a lot of contradictory information. All right? Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to address some of the objections that were raised and the critiques that were raised to my last video, and I don't have time to address them all, obviously, but I do want to discuss some of them. A number of people, it's interesting how many people took issue with my mentioning of God and the idea that God would end up exercising some form of justice when wrongs are committed. I think my point was that we can't catch every rapist or every offender, and that we should try to protect the innocent, even at the expense of sometimes guilty people going free. And I was saying that, leave justice to God. A number of people took issue with that. Well, I actually have kind of complicated theological views that I don't think you want to hear in this video, so I'm not going to get into them. They're not traditional views, and again, it's just my feelings that you're probably not interested in on that subject or whatever. But yes, I understand how that sounded to you. But look, here's my belief, all right? I just believe that there is something that is more morally repugnant about punishing an innocent person than allowing a potentially guilty person to go free. And a number of you seem to disagree with that. You will sacrifice the innocent person so that you can get the guilty person. Maybe that's just sort of a basic, as the philosophers say, a priori thing where we're just on different planets on that one, because I just can't agree with that. I think that one is just more repugnant than the other. And that's what I was trying to get at with the whole God thing, is we can't have perfect justice, but we can sure as hell, anyway, we can sure as hell try to protect the innocent. And there's this famous quote by John Adams. Hopefully I have time to put it in here. So here's the quote from John Adams. He says, "We are to look upon it as more beneficial that many guilty persons should escape unpunished than one innocent should suffer. The reason is because it's of more importance to community that innocence should be protected than it is that guilt should be punished. For guilt and crimes are so frequent in the world that all of them cannot be punished, and many times they happen in such a manner that it is not of much consequence to the public whether they are punished or not. But when innocence itself is brought to the bar and condemned, especially to die, the subject will exclaim, 'It is immaterial to me whether I behave well or ill, for virtue itself is no security.' And if such a sentiment as this should take place in the mind of the subject, there would be an end to all security whatsoever." All right. If you don't get all of that, I know it's a lot to take in, but, pause it, ponder it. But I think it's interesting. So, I don't know. I'm not trying to be, as someone accused me of, being pretentious. I'm not trying to be pretentious by throwing that in there. I'm just saying it makes sense to me. And that's what I was getting at. Okay, another one of you said, look, get real. If this were just a guy down the street who you heard was into kinky sex and stuff, are you telling me that you would be making excuses for him or trying to presume he's innocent or whatever? Well, I have to tell you, quite frankly, actually, you know, you don't know me and it's fine, but this is a big thing with me, the presumption of innocence, and I have made that argument for guys down the street, and so to speak, and so I promise you that I am consistent in that. However, your point is well taken in general. I get what you're saying, and here's what I would say to that, all right? And here's where maybe this will be one of the more controversial or weird things that I'll say, and some of you will be like, what is she talking about? Or that's stupid, but anyway, I'm going to say it. I do think that there are certain positions that people hold in society that are sometimes more unique or in some ways more rare or more significant, and that, yes, we do give those people, and we should give those people, a certain degree of wider latitude to conduct themselves than we normally do. Now, I'm not saying we should let those people rape or we should let those people assault or whatever. I'm simply saying that even if you personally don't agree with me, that Marilyn Manson did for a number of years represent like some legitimate ideas. If you look at, interviews that he's done, and if you, understand his lyrics and so on, and I'm not a big Marilyn Manson fan. I could actually only tell you maybe about 6 songs off the top of my head. But from what I know and from the research that I've done for this, I mean, there is some depth to his ideas. One of those ideas being, and this is very, popular and commonplace almost in philosophy, but the idea being that the dimension of darkness, that the dark side is a necessary counterpart to the light, that we live in a world, a binary, dichotomous world. Sorry for those words some of you don't like, but point being that we live in a world that is in many ways split between 2 extremes. You can think of something like safety versus violence. You can think of, sunshine versus night, or whatever, right? These extremes of human experience, and that there are times where it's interesting and perhaps even useful for society to have artists to represent that dark side. So the same way that a number of us appreciate horror films and think that there could actually be artistic and even philosophical merit in a horror film, or in a work by Edgar Allan Poe or something like that, right? Can see something perhaps like that in Marilyn Manson. And also, he did for many years, I guess still does, represent this sort of, the philosopher Nietzsche, would call it this kind of Ubermenchian character, this person who stands up against society and does his own thing. And, that is his place in society that he has earned. And I say earned because he's done something that I sure as hell haven't done, become a major superstar and successful mega musician. I don't know if any of you have done it. So yes, it is something, okay? I even if you don't like his music, even if you think that he's obscene and he gives you the creeps, he has earned a certain status in society and a certain role in society. And so then for society to turn around and use that against him, that is problematic to me. Now, if he really did rape somebody, if he really did abuse these women, if what they're saying is accurate and right and all of that, then of course I don't think that society excuses crimes, okay, or excuses this kind of, of torture or whatever. But I, again, as I've talked about in my other video, and go watch it please if you haven't, and in this video to a degree, I don't necessarily buy that narrative. There's plenty of room for doubt. And for people to be saying, look, he was such a, look, he's such a freak, and what's his point in society anyway, that anybody should even care about him? Well, I do think that certain allowances can be made for eccentric, weird, or even disturbing behavior, not assault, okay, or whatever. But I'm saying, he has earned a certain leniency in terms of us not expecting him to be a normal, buttoned up, normal citizen, corporate person, whatever. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not being very eloquent, actually, but I hope that you get it. I'm going to move on. Someone said, how are you arguing that he's boring and kinky at the same time? In other words, she said that I was quoting Rose McGowan, who attested to the fact that their domestic life was very mundane and ordinary. And then on the other hand, saying that, people should expect that if they get into a relationship with him, that it's going to be kinky. Yeah, I don't know which way he is. Okay. I have no idea. It would not surprise me at all to find out that Marilyn Manson is actually super vanilla and conventional or shy or whatever. I mean, he claims he's shy, but it would also not surprise me certainly to find out that he was into super, super kinky or even problematic sex. So I just don't know. And that's what I keep saying. I'm just presenting these things to you to show you there's room for doubt. All these contradictions all over the place, and everybody's just reading it one way. Another issue I have with some of the stories that are swirling around him, and I'm not talking about the accuser's direct testimony, but some of what's gotten out in the media is really like a game of telephone now. I mean, I don't know how you, Otep Shamaria or whatever, I don't know how you say her name. I don't even know who she is really. But she came out and did this big media announcement on Instagram or wherever, and, basically this sorry, not sorry thing. And she's like, it tells this story about, and I can't even remember it or follow it or whatever, but she was like, she was dating somebody who was friends with Marilyn Manson's wife's sister. I don't even know. And she heard something, and then there's something like this. Take a look at this. What is, and I know this is not a big accusation or anything, but this is the kind of stuff that you just see floating around on the internet. Like this guy, he tells the story about how Marilyn Manson, threw some drug dealer into the pool at a party. Oh my God. I mean, it's just, and he's like it's all this, it's this stuff. We're look, you have to understand, okay? And this holds true even if it turns out these women are telling the truth about Manson, okay? But you have to understand that we are at a kind of inflection point in our evolution as a species. We are in uncharted territory with the saturation of media in our culture and the way that it is warping our experience of reality, and it is causing people to act in problematic ways in which they would not have acted necessarily in the past. And I'm talking about, and you could even say I'm contributing to it by making these videos about celebrity, and I totally maybe am. But this sort of drama, celebrity obsessed culture, and where everything is about these 24-hour narratives and photo ops and all of this stuff, and it's all about the 15 minutes of fame and promoting yourself, and if you're an actor, to being an activist, being seen as an activist and all this. Look, I'm just saying in general, things have reached a point of craziness. And I just saw that the host of The Bachelor had to step down because he made some comment about the woke police or something. I mean, are we really, look, I don't watch that fucking show, but are we really saying that the host of The Bachelor is racist and he has to quit because of that? I mean, you could not find a more boring, vanilla, inoffensive man than that man who hosts The Bachelor. And he's a threat. He needs to be taken off the air. I mean, come on. It is loony. And so regardless of what it turns out to be true or not with the Marilyn Manson stuff, you have to understand that we are existing in a kind of a developing madhouse right now, and what media and everything is doing to us. And so we have got to find a way to slow it. We've got to find a way to slow it down somehow. I don't know how. I mean, when I was growing up, or when I was a teenager, in terms of porn, there was Playboy magazine and there was Cinemax, right? Like those softcore things that they would show. And then maybe, I guess, maybe some men or older people would go to those porno stores, those kind of sleazy porno stores. No offense to people like porn, but they just had a sleazy feel. And But nowadays you've got like the internet, you've got 10-year-olds watching gangbangs, and I mean we know it's fucking people up in the head. All these studies that say, well, anyway, that's another video maybe sometime. But my point is, we have got to start reining in some of this stuff with cancel culture and rush to judgment and these media stories that get blown up. And I'm not saying that that's I know that's what's happening in the Manson case, but I'm saying that we're in a different time, and we've got to take a breath with some of this stuff. I guess the final point that I want to make is that all of these stories that are coming out about him, and I'm not talking about the primary accusations necessarily. And I guess one more point, and I guess another point that I want to make. There's this. With someone like Manson, who has lived such a public life, an edgy life, a complicated life, a life that in many ways is basically, doing this to the world, it's bound to, and especially the fact that he's a celebrity, a huge celebrity, a rock star, it is bound to attract not only way more interest than your average person's life, but also way more complication. And Manson famously said that he was a flypaper for damaged women. And I know that sounds like a deeply insulting thing. And I'm not asserting that it's true for all the women he dated or that it's necessarily true for the accusers. But there may be some accuracy in what he was saying there. And we have to remember there's almost a kind of it's called a Rashomon effect. So there was this movie decades ago called Rashomon, and basically the movie was about this one event that took place, and then it would show that event from different people's perspectives. And we're kind of used to that technique now, but it's called the Rashomon effect in film, and it was considered to be this really interesting cutting edge thing. And of course, the idea being that our experience with something, or in this case with Manson, someone's experience with him, it's just a small sliver of experience compared to all of the other perspectives of all of the other people. And so when you see some of these stories coming out, understand that, and understand too, that because of the media attention that these stories generate, even if we're just talking about something as benign as Phoebe Bridgers telling that story about how she was at his house and he made the joke about the rape room, it gets a lot of attention. And it's interesting that she made that statement right before she did her guitar smashing Saturday Night Live performance. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying there, but it's interesting timing that she chose to that same week to come out with this declaration about Manson. But my point being that there's a bandwagon that can happen with things like this, where people reach into their minds and they'll latch on to some weird exchange they had with Manson, or something that probably didn't even bother them that much at the time. But now, it's making an impression, and they know they'll get that attention if they go out there. I mean, for instance, there's the woman who, I believe that she was his stylist, and she said that he held a gun to her head and made some kind of homophobic joke or something. Well, told, in that context, in isolation like that, yes, it sounds completely bizarre. But wasn't this like the prelude to a photo shoot? And of course, like, he acts as I said in the other video, in these edgy ways because he's expected to always be the edgiest one in the room. And the thing is, a number of people on Instagram were pointing out is that this woman continued to work with him and have this happy professional relationship with him and tout her relationship with him and post about it and stuff, even after this supposedly horrifying incident where he jokingly held the gun to her head. I'm not justifying holding a gun to someone's head for fun. I'm saying that it does mean something that she continued to have this sort of happy work relationship with him that she bragged about. It means something. And the problem with this case and with other cases is that we are being asked to almost forced to turn off our brains in certain respects. And we are being asked to deny things that we know on a gut level to be problematic. And no, I absolutely do not know that these women are mistaken or lying or misrepresenting or rewriting history or whatever. But neither do I know that Marilyn Manson is guilty. And I'm not going to be bullied into believing that. And I'm not going to be told that I'm some horrible sexist, you know. I know, like, none of you are saying that, but I'm just saying that's the message we get in general from society, and I'm tired of that message and being told that if you think in a contrarian, non-conformative way on certain hot button issues, then you're automatically culpable of something. You're automatically wrong. All right, so I'm not going to keep going on and on. I hope you've enjoyed this video or found it interesting. It's not exactly the best Valentine's Day video. Happy Valentine's Day, honey. Let's watch this video about Marilyn Manson and sexual assault. But there's my gallows humor joke at the end for you, so I'm sure I'll get lots of comments about that. Anyway, my next video, like I said, will be about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Thank you, and please subscribe. And of course, I always appreciate any PayPal tips, even $1. I get really excited when I get $1 because I don't get that many tips, and that's fine. I don't do it for that. But if you're so inclined, it would be great. But otherwise, have a great day. Bye bye.